Sterile Processing University presents Issues and Challenges in Sterile Processing. Welcome to our new episode, Beers, Nails, and Jewelry, when the style meets sterile processing. I'm Jason Morosi.
And I'm Nancy Chapman.
Well, welcome back again, Nancy. All right, so
It's the hot topic.
hot topic today. This is one of my favorite topics. With the way that my pet peeve is always dress code, and my thing is, if you can't get dressed, how are you going to succeed? You have to dress for success, and this is the most easiest part of sterile processing. I feel just coming to work dressed appropriately, and it's 9 out of 10 people can't do it.
But I think with your OR background, it's a little bit different because that's ingrained in OR personnel from the get-go. In sterile processing, I know when I started 40 plus years ago, they didn't even provide us with scrubs. And if they did, we had to take them home. And in the 80s, early 80s, we didn't have bloodborne pathogens. So when we wash instruments, if you wanted to wear gloves, fine. If you didn't, that was fine too. You didn't have it was a free-for-all, but we didn't know any better because the science wasn't there. Bloodborne pathogens wasn't passed till 1991.
Wow.
So in the 80s, we were like sitting ducks, but we didn't know any better. So, and it's hard when you have people who've been around a long time, they get into bad habits, but education is really the key, because if people don't understand the risk, they're not going to take the precautions. And I remember I was teaching a sterile processing class very early on, and I have to tell this because it brings the point home. We had a doctor's office building that was attached to our hospital, and a young girl was assigned to go pick up their instruments because we processed them every night. And at that time, no bloodborne pathogens, so they would put them in paper bags, they would put them in plastic bags, whatever they had. So she came back with the instruments, and when she went in to decontam, she reached into the paper bag and got stuck with a knife blade on an instrument because you didn't have to take it off either. And unfortunately, it turned out the patient had HIV. The girl developed it. And at that time, there was no cure. There was no treatment. And I don't remember how long she lasted, but she never survived. And that was really a call that came to us, like, we got to really start protecting ourselves. And, then as things ramped up with HIV, then, there was a call to get some kind of protection for the phlebotomists who were taking blood from patients. We lost phlebotomists in our hospital like crazy because nobody wanted to get exposed to blood. Yeah. So people think, well, they weren't there to see what can happen when you don't comply with the standards that are there to protect you. Yeah, it might be inconvenient, but it's more inconvenient to get sick or even worse, die. So I think that all factors into it, Jason.
Yeah, because I started in 1996, so bloodborne pathogens were already, that was established, the teaching of it yearly. Right. But now it makes sense to me because I remember when I started, a lot of the people that had been in the business were so laxed. And I couldn't understand it because I was like, I was also, again, 20 years old, looking at bones and all this tissue when I was in decontam going, ew. I was still getting.
We were responsible in the early 80s to collect the used needles and syringes. Well, the syringes came to us in a cardboard box, and the manufacturers were nice enough to put a perforation in the top that once you took the needles out, you cut out that perforated place and you could put the used ones in. And so my department was responsible to go pick them up. Needles were sticking out all over the place. We didn't have PPE or anything back then, but that's the way it was.
Probably transported it, open cart too?
Oh, gosh, yeah. In their hands sometimes. They'd go down the ER and come back with a couple boxes in their hands.
Oh, my God. I agree.
Yeah, so that was the wild, wild west.
Now, I guess with dress code, that's a shared, I would say a shared, it's not just an Amy thing because you also have OSHA.
Oh, OSHA takes
Yeah.
precedence over everything. CDC determines what type of PPE you should wear.
Mhm.
OSHA enforces that you wear the PPE to protect you. And, it's kind of sad that we have to have a law to protect people from themselves, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But that's why it's so important. People think, well, I've seen people say, well, I just have to go check on something and decontam. And they run in there and run out thinking if they run in and out fast, nothing's going to happen to them. You don't know that.
Uh-huh.
You go in there and you touch a couple things on the table and you don't even have gloves on. You don't have a gown on. You're hitting against the table. You could be contaminating your scrub suit.
Oh,
So
yeah.
there should be zero tolerance for non-compliance with the dress code policy.
I always loved and when you're in decontam, well, the person's in decontam, they do like 5 case carts. They still have their gloves, their gown on, and then next thing you know, as the manager, you come walking down the hallway, and you just see them like halfway out the door talking to one of their friends, and you're like, get in there! Like you just spent the last 2 hours touching all this bloody, nasty stuff, and you're out and hanging out in the hallway.
The worst thing I ever saw was when I walked into a surgery center and there was a case cart that the young lady was emptying, and an orderly was sitting on top of the case cart. It was a horizontal case cart, and he had a cup of coffee and a bagel, and he
Oh,
spoke to her. And I looked at him and I said, "You enjoy eating all kinds of germs with your bagel?" And he started laughing. He thought it was a big joke. I mean, what do you do with stuff like that? I mean, if I was the manager, first of all, he didn't belong in there. Secondly, had an OSHA violation. He should have been written up. And I'm sorry if people think that that's an issue, but the OSHA standard says that the employer has the responsibility to enforce compliance with the OSHA regulation.
uh-huh.
So if your director writes you up, they are complying with the law because you didn't comply with the law.
Yeah. I tell you, when I years ago, probably well over 10, I worked in this one facility, and in the operating room, we had an orderly who cleaned the operating rooms. But
Uh-huh.
whatever she was having for lunch, she would put in a napkin and keep in her pocket. So
Oh,
she'd be mopping the floor, and then she would take a break and she'd pull out whatever she's and just like pull, start taking little bites and put it back in her pocket. And I was actually in charge of the orderlies and sterile processing, and I love the lady to death, but I had to constantly remind her, and I think eventually we had to do like corrective action. And then
people, go ahead.
then the other big thing was I think it was 2017. This was the first time I ever saw this, but it brings up to what you were talking about. I was in a facility, I guess that's considered more Central America, and I walked into the sterile processing, and they were wearing jeans and scrub tops and
Yeah.
whatever scrub, Scooby Doo, whatever the one they wanted.
Yeah, it is an issue, and we can get a little chuckle out of some of these things and think they're outrageous, but that was the reality. And I haven't seen as much non-compliance. Mainly, what I see is people not wearing it correctly. They might have the correct PPE, but they don't wear it correctly, which is just as bad.
Mhm.
But we're halfway there. At least they got it.
Absolutely. So let's say let's jump in. Do we want to, I guess, address about having making sure that you know the standards and having a policy? I think is the start.
Yeah, because again, in your policy should be reference to OSHA, CDC, and AAMI, because they're the triumvirate, the three organizations or agencies that regulate or promulgate the standards that you have to comply with. In the policy, it should state what type of PPE is necessary according to the standard. For example, you have to have in decontam. Now, let's differentiate. There's two dress codes. There's a general dress code for the clean areas, and there's a decontam dress code for the decontam area. So in decontam, you have to have a impervious fluid resistant gown. But a new document was published by AAMI, PB70, which is protective barriers, that for the first time specified the level of safety for that gown. In other words, how much protection are you going to get from fluid breaking through the gown? Now, the gowns are level 1, 2, 3, and 4. A level 3 gown is the minimum that you are permitted in decontam. In the OR, it has to be a level 4. But if you're doing a lot of total joints, cardiovascular, thoracic that are invasive, not the non-invasive, you could be exposed to a lot more blood. In that case, you might need a level 4 in decontam as well. Now, the manufacturers of the gowns are required to label their gowns with the level, so you know what kind of gown you're getting. So that's the first thing. I'm still finding about 80% of the facilities do not have level 3 gowns, nor have they heard of it. That's the first problem.
Yeah.
Secondly, you have to have a face shield, single use or reusable. Most people get the single use, or goggles. That's because according to bloodborne pathogens, you have to protect your mucous membranes. Now, safety glasses are not a substitute for eye protection. Okay. Number 3, you have to have decontamination gloves. At least 80% non-compliance. I find people wearing exam gloves, vinyl gloves, nitrile gloves, but they're not decontam gloves. Decantams are specific thickness. They are at least 12 inches in length. They do have decontamination gloves that are 18 inches in length. So if you're doing like endoscopy, doing a lot of scopes, you need longer gloves because you have deeper sinks. And you want to make sure that the glove has some kind of design where the fingertips will allow you to grab onto things without them slipping out of your hand. But they're thicker in thickness to protect you from injuries. Then you have to have a fluid-resistant face mask, similar to the one they use in the operating room. Now,
without the shield.
What?
Without the shield.
Right, I was just going to say that. I still see too many people wearing the face mask with the shield attached. That is not permissible because AAMI says that you have to protect the mucous membranes from splashes from all angles. When you have the mask with the shield, you could get fluids that come over the top. How? Happened to me. One of my own employees at one of my facilities was in decontam 3 times. I had given her a warning to stop using the mask with the shield. Well, she was using it again that day, had a tray of instruments that she was ready to put in the sink to do the soak and the initial wash, slipped out of her hand like a tsunami. It came back over the shield and she had an exposure. And for that, then she was suspended because she had 3 warnings and didn't follow our policy. So people need to know that. Then, of course, you need a head cover that's not going to protect you other than keeping hair out of your trays. And then you have to have shoe covers. Now, there's 2 types of shoe covers. There's the shoe covers that just keep dust off the floor. And then there's the fluid-resistant shoe covers. In decontam, you need the fluid-resistant shoe covers so that they are protecting your shoes from any fluids that get on them. Because if you get it into leather, it's not going to come out. Yeah. On the clean side, you could have the regular shoe covers. Now, the problem is exacerbated because people are not trained how to apply or remove it. And yes. CDC has a poster that you can download from their website that shows the steps. You always start with the shoe covers. They go on first, they come off first. But there's certain steps, especially when you're removing. Over 80%, there was a study that was done, and over 80% of the people who were wearing PPE contaminated their attire when they were removing the PPE. I see people just get the gown, rip it off, roll it into a ball, and put it in the trash.
Yes, or just ripping it in pieces.
Correct. So, so your policy has to have all of that. I usually recommend a separate policy on donning and doffing that you could put, put in decontam as well as the chart. that you can get from CDC. Now, that chart from the CDC was actually developed during the Ebola outbreak. The only thing that's missing from there is shoe covers. So we just wrote it in with a magic marker that the shoe covers are applied first, and then on the removal, they're removed first. But so you need to have the correct type of PPE, and they have to know how to apply it and remove it correctly. That all three things, or you're not providing them with the protection they need.
And that should be in the competencies, every year, no matter how long someone's worked there. And you really need, as a leader, if you're a manager or a supervisor, you really to make sure that you do it when you're doing it. And if someone's not doing it right, you got to correct them.
Now, part of the issue is who's making the decision to buy the PPE. If it's a materials manager, and God knows we need them, they may not be aware of what the regulations are. So they might have, a lot of these smaller facilities have one-stop shopping. They get a company and they get everything from them, their packaging, their BIs, everything. So just say, I need gloves for decontam. I need a gown. I am still seeing people wearing yellow isolation gowns. Now, I actually did a little study. It was just 3 people were all wearing yellow isolation gowns. I had one wear it for 10 minutes, one wear it for 15 minutes, one wear it for 30 minutes. Now, you're in decontam all day long, but I wanted to prove a point. 30 minutes, 20 minutes, 10 minutes. In 15 minutes, we had strike through.
Wow.
Because they weren't designed for fluid retention. Now, if it's an isolation gown and you want to use it for decontam, it must be labeled as a level 3. If it's not labeled level 3, you cannot use it. So this is a big, big issue.
And I know I can tell you too, I've seen so many people that get strike throughs and just change their clothes and go back and put a new gown on, and never say hey boss, I'm in here, 2 times a week, and I'm always soaking wet because the gowns are not protecting me. Nobody says stuff like that. They just get changed.
But this is why managers and infection preventionists need to know what the standards are. I mean, this is as much under infection prevention as anybody else. And if you reference your policy to the 3 documents we talked about, then you could go to risk management and go to the infection control committee and say, look, we have a problem. We just learned that our gowns have to be labeled at least a level 3, and our gowns are not labeled. We're getting these little plastic aprons to wear, and it's not sufficient. We're in violation of the OSHA standard. Anybody who didn't comply with that is crazy.
Yeah. And you mentioned before about the materials, management, directors, managers. I could tell you, that should be one of your best friends at work is your material manager. It really should. When you're a manager of sterile processing, that should be one of your best friends, because just like you said, if you don't even have to take it to a drastic level, most of the time, if they were told to buy something and you go in there and you give them the correct standards or show them the policy, they're going to go, oh, okay, let me figure out what the substitution is and see if that works better.
Correct.
It's so easy, but a lot of politics get in play and people don't want to talk and or communicate, and you got to push all that politics aside and do what's right for your staff and for yourself.
Well, I want to just reiterate what you had said. You need to have the policy. You need to have something about donning and doffing, and there should be some evidence of demonstration during the annual competencies to make sure that people understand how important, because people do, start taking shortcuts and they get into bad habits, and that's not good. We don't want anything to happen to them.
Yeah. And I think it's also one other thing I'd like to point out in decontam, because I've seen this a lot too. Some people might have some really nice big glasses that they use for eyesight. That is not eye protection.
No. Well, that's where face shield works best.
Yes.
if you're not wearing glasses, then you could wear goggles with a face mask. But especially, I wear larger glasses, and I could not do anything but use a face shield.
Hmm. And the other thing I like to point out before we end decontam is the removal of the hairnet, which always seems to be forgotten.
Well, this is interesting you mentioned that, Jason. AORN changed their dress code policy. And they actually said that they don't want the staff to remove the head cover when they finish a case because they could actually put more bioburden and contaminants on their scrub attire.
Hmm.
Now, a lot of the surveyors now have carried that over into SPD. No,
Correct.
our policy is everything comes off, it's considered contaminants.
Yep.
Your head cover is contaminated. I've actually had Joint Commission surveyors cite facilities because they saw the sterile processing personnel leaving decontam, sometimes even with shoe covers, but mainly with their head cover on. And you don't get your head cover and put in your pocket and then put it on again later. I see a lot of that too.
Yeah, I actually remember when they made that rule and it went into play, and the arguments I would have with my, perioperative leaders because they wanted sterile processing not to change their hat because ARN said it. And I was like spend 3 hours in decontam, please, and tell me what you think. you
Well,
know?
I think there's a greater understanding now that there's a AORN representative and has been for some time now on AAMI ST 79 committee. So I think they understand there are a lot of similarities, there are some differences between what the OR should do and what sterile processing should do.
Mm-hmm. The next subject I would like to really tackle too. This is again as a guy perspective because this one is the beards and facial hair.
Yeah.
This drives me nuts. And again, you're right. I have that OR background, so almost 30 years. I've been in peri-op services. I've never ever had facial hair for the fact that it was just I didn't want to worry about covering it. I didn't want to, have hair fall, contaminate anything, especially when I was scrubbing, and especially when I was putting a tray together. Um, I I know some guys they like it for the the look and style and stuff, but I just could never do it. I always had to have clean shave.
Well, again, that becomes part of your general dress code. It's
Yeah.
really important. And I always made a point of this when I was interviewing somebody to tell them you have to wear a head cover. I
Hmm.
tell them we're going to talk about jewelry and stuff like that in a minute. I tell them the gentlemen they have to wear all of your hair, facial hair has to be covered except your eyebrows. So if you don't tell them, and then they come in and it is an issue like, well, no, I'm not going to be shaving, just to work here. I'm not going to wear a mask. I can't. What I hear is I can't breathe with a mask, and then you shouldn't be working here either. Um,
Yes.
so it's really important that they know this before you even hire them,
Hmm.
because giving them, and this is where it helps if you give them a tour of the department and they could see other people. Of course, you go in just the one day you find the gentleman not wearing his beard cover, and
Yes.
then that's not too good. But they have to understand that this is not optional. This is a requirement. It's not something that Nancy says or Jason says. These are the standards, and we have to comply with them because we are a manufacturer of sterile product. In Canada, they're changing the name to medical device reprocessors.
I like that.
I do too.
Yeah.
I think we should change it in the United States because sterile processing doesn't mean anything to anybody like Central Supply didn't or Central Service didn't. But when it comes to medical device reprocessor, hey, they
Hmm.
must be doing something with things that are used on me. But
Yeah.
that's another show. But
It's funny you were saying about the masks. I can't breathe, and I've heard that 100 times. I can't breathe, and again, having that OR background, I used to tell my staff, try being scrubbed in on a case for 6 hours with no break. You can't leave. You can't walk away. You have to have your hands like this for 6 hours. Like don't complain to me when you're sitting in a chair, getting up, going to the radio. Like my heart could not bleed for anybody after having those types of experience. And I had many hours of that where I had to wear a mask for 6, 7 hours, no break, because it was not, in patient's best interest for me to take be scrubbed out in the middle of a case. So, I always would try to remind sterile processing people, if you think you got it bad, it can be way worse sometimes.
Well, to get back to decontam for a minute,
Mhm.
one of the issues is it is extremely hard to work in decontam. Most people don't want to work there because it's hot, it's congested, you got stuff coming at you from every angle.
Uh-huh.
You have all this noise from all the different equipment going on, and that equipment is also emanating a lot of heat into the area. And then on top of that, you're wearing plastic attire.
Yeah.
So, it is an uncomfortable. Now, there are temperature and humidity standards that have to be followed. There's cooling vests and cooling collars that you could use. And one of the other recommendations from AAMI is to offer more frequent breaks. If you normally take one break, lunch, and a break in the afternoon, maybe do two breaks and in the morning, or two breaks in the afternoon, wherever you get the larger amount of processing going on. Usually in the morning, it takes a while for decontam to heat up because your equipment's not working. And, usually when you get to lunchtime, when most of the cases start coming down, that's when it's really percolating in there.
Yeah.
And so it's really important that we recognize that and do what we can to keep the employees comfortable, because there are some people, unfortunately, that are not compliant because they are uncomfortable, and that's not an excuse. We've got to do something about that. Now, you can't bring fans in there,
No.
but there's other things you could do.
And as two leaders got to be, open-minded. Like I've had many times, I've had somebody who's got hit with totals and back cases all day, and they're getting killed in decontam, and they come out and say, I need an extra break. Like like, of course, like, you don't want to overload your employee because what's going to happen is that they're not going to want to go back in, or guess who's going to be out sick tomorrow?
Yeah. Well, that's to be expected. I mean, it's a different pace entirely in decontam, because decontam runs the whole department.
Mhm.
If we get backed up there, then we're backed up, but we're losing ground every place else. We can't prep the trays or sterilize the trays till they come out of decontam. Now, there are days that you walk in and there's 240 trays waiting in prep and packaging. And
Yes.
that's another whole issue, we're going to talk about in the next podcast on equipment. So we won't get into it now. But we've got to, unless you've worked decontam, which you and I both have on many occasions, you don't understand what it's like back there. And it is the most important job in the department. I've said this before. If they don't do their job correctly, we're wasting our time on the other side. So we need to support the decontam staff and make sure that they need another break or whatever, that we've got to, help them because they're the most important people.
I can tell you, as a leader, especially as a manager, when I had supervisors, I never felt comfortable pulling my supervisor out of their everyday job when we were shortchanged.
Mhm.
I always said, I will go into decontam as the staff person that we're missing, to give my regular staff a break, because that would mean somebody would have had to have an extra day. And I let my supervisor do what they do every day, and that
Right.
was, I was always very adamant about that. And I would, just go in for the day. And my staff loved it for that, because I didn't overload them. And my supervisor was thankful that, they weren't getting pulled into decontam. They were running the show like they normally do.
But today we don't have working managers like you. In other words, a manager, when the chips are down, will go back there and can do anything in the department. Many times where I would go in decontam, and the manager needs to know how to do anything in that department and be able to jump in. That's how you show your staff that you're supporting them. You have their back.
Uh-huh.
And I don't see that enough. Yes, I know managers are busy, but there were many times when I would call and say, I'm sorry, I can't come to this meeting. We have a problem. Either we have equipment down or we're short of staff, and I'm going to have to help out in the department. Nobody would ever say, no, you have to be at this meeting. They go, no, do what you have to do. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think people delude themselves to thinking they're so important that they can't miss a meeting. Meanwhile, you're not doing what you were hired to do, is to provide services to the patients who are coming there.
Uh-huh.
And I think we need to see more of that. I think instead of managers thinking that it lowers their opinion, no, it
Yeah.
raises your opinion with the staff. Like, hey, you're in it with us, and we appreciate that.
Yeah, I've had those situations where I've done, like you're only supposed to give one person off a week for vacation, and then somebody has this, second person is like, I don't know, their family bought them a trip, or somebody is sick in their family and they have to go, and then I approve two people off, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm shortchanging myself. Then I get all my call outs, and I have had situations where, yeah, I had to go to my direct boss and say, for the week, no meetings, no nothing. I am 100% staffed. I got two people on vacation, and I'm getting, call outs. People are late. No problem. I have never been told, oh no, you need to go to this meeting. Okay, so one thing I want to circle back to is that we were talking about before with all the facial cover. It is constantly, I know I've been challenged a lot, and it's talked about when you enforce beard covers and hair covers, and then people go, well, what about my eyebrows? That's hair.
Well, there obviously isn't enough scientific evidence to warrant it. Otherwise, AORN would have it in their standards. So um, we have to follow the standards. If it was important and there was scientific evidence, they would have included it.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, I wasn't involved when they did all those studies. That's the one good thing I will say about AORN and AAMI. Everything is based on science.
Uh-huh.
You know, unless there's scientific evidence, they're not going to put it in there.
Yeah. I
Because
also think too, the other thing is eyelashes, extensions.
now that's another thing. All right, so now we're talking about prep and packaging because, well, actually, the general dress code.
Uh-huh.
Um, on the clean side, you have to be provided with a clean scrub suit that is laundered at the facility or by a laundry that's contracted by the facility. You are not permitted to take your scrub attire home. And we still have facilities that are not providing scrub attire to the employees that have been already laundered.
Uh-huh.
Number two, you have to provide attire, and this goes for decontam as well, that fits everybody. They got those jumpsuits, one size fits none. That you put them on and you
Yes.
can't get them over your hips, and they rip if you bend over.
Yep.
Um,
Ready.
so same thing with scrub suits. You see people walking around and they can't even tie it around their waist. So they have to have sufficient sizes to accommodate all the staff. Those are the two biggest things, be it gowns or jumpsuits or regular scrub attire. The other thing is when it comes to eyelashes. Now, AORN does not permit false eyelashes. AAMI is updating ST79. And I don't know if anyone else, I plan to request that they adopt that provision from AORN because they can fall off and they can get into a tray.
Oh,
That is the issue.
I've had it. I've worked at facilities where the operating room has opened up a tray, and a fake eyelash was in it.
Hmm.
That's when I, told my staff, I don't care what's in our policy right this second, and I don't care what is in the standard. You're not wearing them. They fall out. It's a foreign object. And then I would work on getting it into my policy. But one time that was enough for me to go, no way.
Yeah, it's hard to get stuff into a policy if it's not in a standard. Like the other thing that's a problem in prep and packaging, AORN has documentation that when you have bare arms, which we have a scrub suit, usually just above the elbow down is bare. There's tissue, there's skin squams, there's even hair that is coming off of your arms that can get into your trays.
Mm-hmm.
Now, AORN addressed it in terms of dress code with the sterile core and what have you, which they've taken a little step back, but it's directly applicable to SPD. So I'm hoping that they're going to include that. But for the time being, it should be in your dress code. You can reference AORN, and either you provide them with the scrub jacket,
Uh-huh.
or there are disposable sleeves that they can wear,
Yes.
so that it will protect their arms. But it's really important that they have their arms protected as well as the facial hair protection.
I've been a big advocate about the sleeves, and because I'd get a lot of staff telling me the jackets, it's too hot when they put trays together. And
Right.
I love the sleeves. I would be like, no problem. I think it's funny because I remember when we really didn't have jackets or, worry about covering the arms. And here would be me looking the way I do right now with my head, wearing a hairnet with a bald head, but then my arms would be, way more hair on my arms than in my head. So I appreciate the jacket and the arm covers and stuff. I really think that's very appropriate.
Yeah, well, again, when you have facilities that aren't even providing hospital or facility laundered scrubs to try and get the jackets is a whole nother issue. But we've got to do it. I mean, yeah, I understand we're all cost conscious today, but there's a rationale for all of this.
Uh-huh.
If it's not needed, I'm the first one to say we don't need it.
Oh, yeah. And they wouldn't,
That's why you need that documentation, though, and to go to the infection prevention committee with your dress code policy, because you need a policy on dress code. Now, I have a general dress code policy, but I state in there that the dress code for decontamination is in the decontam policy, because that one you would follow the general dress code, but then you have the PPE you have to wear as well. So it has to be addressed in both policies, reference to the appropriate documents, and approved by infection prevention. And
now,
so once they approve it, you're done.
Oh, yeah. Now, here's the best part I love about sterile processing: jewelry and personal items, and the prep and back, or even deep back.
I almost feel like it's a jewelry show.
Yes.
Who could wear more jewelry today? Oh, I just got this ring. Oh, I just bought this bracelet. Oh, how do you like my? First of all, one thing that forgot to mention, your personal clothing should not be visible from beneath your scrub. And in the wintertime, I know it's cold, but I see people with turtleneck sweaters and long sleeves that they're wearing in the prep area, or even decontam, but usually the prep area. You have to understand that if your scrub suit has to be laundered to a specific qualification, how do we know that you're home laundering the same way? So you could be bringing contaminants in. That's why they stop people from laundering their scrubs at home, because you could use cold water, I could use hot water. You use bleach, I didn't use bleach. You had them dry on the line where the birds could do voodoo on them, and I'm doing them in a dryer. So there could be no consistency, and there was no way to monitor that. So you have the same thing here. So if you're cold, you get a warm-up jacket. Okay. Now, in terms of the jewelry, it's the same thing. Do you wash your jewelry? Most people don't wash it. If they wear it, yeah, maybe it's in the shower. I know when I shower, I take mine out so I can wash them separately. But you could bring contaminants in, and you could be bringing contaminants home.
Yes.
Now, that's just from wearing it. Now, you also have a safety issue, and I had this happen to me. I had an employee who just got a brand new bracelet for her birthday. It was like a charm bracelet, and it got caught on one of the baskets for the washer, and she was being pulled into the washer with the basket, and we had to literally, yes, At that time, there were no things where you could stop it. So we literally had to rip off the bracelet. And I said to her, I said, you shouldn't be wearing your jewelry here. Now, we didn't have jewelry policies back then, but
Uh-huh.
even then, you could see that it was a safety issue. Now, when it comes to rings, there's two things with rings. You mentioned stones can come out. Well, they can come out of any type of jewelry.
Uh-huh.
Um, there's a study, AORN has a beautiful study in their dress code policy that the problem with rings is you don't take them off when you wash your hands. And they
Yeah.
found considerable contamination under rings where you're preparing trays.
Uh-huh.
So you could be recontaminating those instruments now. So
Yep.
that's why if you want to wear your wedding band, what the OR people do is they put it on a safety pin and they pin it inside. I don't pin it to my scrub because I can't tell you how much jewelry I've lost that way. I
Yes.
usually do it to my underclothes. But
Yeah.
you have to take your rings off because people are afraid to do it because they put it on the sink. They're afraid they're going to leave it there or it's going to go down the sink drain.
Yep.
So don't wear it at all, or make sure that you remove it and make sure that you move it and you don't lose it so you can clean your hands correctly.
I love being in the office, and I would have that conversation about jewelry, and then being in my office the next day, and one of my team members come in and go, "My husband." I talked to my husband last night, or I talked to my wife last night, and I can't. I have to have my wedding ring, and I'm just like, and they go, and I haven't taken it off in like 5 years. How are you washing your hands correctly?
Yeah, well, a lot of people never take it off.
Yeah.
Never take it off, and that becomes another issue. Um, the other thing that we need to address is fingernails.
Mhm. Well, but quickly before we go off jewelry, very important when it's a slow period, putting it in the Sonic is not washing your
Oh,
jewelry.
oh, are you kidding me?
I have seen it. I have seen OR staff drop off bracelets and
Oh,
rings and say, "Could you ultrasonic it for me at the end of the day after you clean the machines?"
first
No,
of
no,
all,
no.
first of all, the issue is that your ultrasonic machines that we use for decontam are so powerful they could damage the jewelry and actually pull the stones out. It was never designed for jewelry. There are little ones you could buy for jewelry that you could have at home. Also, while they tell you to wipe out the inside of the Sonic, I don't know if there's any way to really effectively decontaminate it. I don't know if they've ever seen a study on that.
Yeah.
But again, it's an education issue. People have to understand that yes, it is a Sonic, but not all Sonics are alike, and that Sonic was not designed for jewelry. So now
All
let's
right.
get to fingernails.
Yes.
Now, there is a standard that the fingernails should not exceed zero point 0.2 millimeters in length. And that's because there's been numerous studies shown that even with careful hand washing, when nails are longer than that, you may not be able to clean under the nail effectively, and you could leave bacteria and residuals behind, which again can get onto the instruments that you're handling. If you hold up your hand and you could see the nail extending from the fingertip, then it's too long.
Uh-huh.
No nail polish, even clear nail polish. They might allow it in the OR. We do not allow it because the nail polish can flake off. Now, do you want to talk about extensions and decorations on nails?
Yes. I mean, that's huge now.
Yes. Well, I actually have a picture of a artificial nail that was found in an OR tray. They
Uh-huh.
opened it up and the nail was there. Um, they now have crystals, they have beads, they have all kinds of things, and people pay a lot of money for this.
Yep.
But again, when people come in for the interview, you should be looking at things like that. If their nails are already done, you need to tell them you can't have that here.
Oh yeah. I mean, I could tell you when somebody comes in with long nails and it has the bracelets up and down their arms and all the jewelry and all the rings all over their finger, you most likely are not going to get. I don't even care if you have experience, because even if you have experience, you're showing me you don't follow, the protocol. Because if you were coming in for a sterile processing interview, you would come in like you were ready to work.
Well, I like to be sure that they understand. You
Hmm.
want the job, I'd like to offer it to you, but you need to understand that in A, B, C, and D, I would tell them all of the
Yeah.
things about what they might see in decontam, and I also tell them about the dress code. Because again, we spend a lot of time and money to hire somebody, and
Mhm.
then it's going to be a battle once they come in. Oh, you didn't tell me I couldn't have my $200 nails.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, that's what always happens, because I go through it on every interview, and then when I did hire the person, it was, it's 2 months of arguing it. It's
yeah.
crazy.
I mean, it's nice if you like that thing, that's fine, but this is not the place for you to work.
Yep. And I
We have,
like the oh, I'm about to go on a cruise next week, so I got my nails done. It's just for this 1 week.
yeah, no, no, we can't have it even for one day. And
Yeah.
when you have a policy and you start amending it, that's when you get into trouble, because you do it for one, now everybody else, you set the precedent. Well, you did it for Mary when she went on a cruise, so why can't I have it? No,
Correct.
a
Yep.
policy has got to be enforced.
Because the other thing is, a lot of people like to wear bracelets, and again, they don't want to take them off, and they pull their scrub thing over, their scrub jacket over it, and they go, look, it's covered. And then 5 minutes later, they're doing a tray and they're moving their hands, and all of a sudden, all you see is bracelets,
Right,
and
right.
you're like,
There's no way to keep them covered.
you just got to take them off.
Now, with earrings, if the earrings fit inside of your head cover and stay there, that's okay. But
Mhm.
some of these earrings are so long that they start working their way out, which is not acceptable. And your head cover is supposed to cover all of your hair. I still see people that leave the front out.
Mhm.
Well, I want to look nice. Well,
Things.
you're not in a beauty contest here.
Mhm.
Hair means all of your hair, so you have to wear your head cover. And that brings us to another point. What about when people buy their own scrub jacket, warm-up jackets, or their own head covers, because they like to have, well, maybe for 4th of July, they want a patriotic one. For Easter, they have one with bunnies and what have you. Who's laundering them?
Mhm. You even got a
Because,
lot of times, you got OR staff that loves to make them at home and sell them to the staff.
but they cannot bring them home and launder them and bring them back in.
Yeah.
So if you want this, then you have to have them laundered by the laundry, and nobody's going to want. They said, "Wait, I just paid for this. They're probably going to lose them." Then you can't bring them in,
Mhm.
because again, two standards of care. The scrubs have to be done by the hospital, but your warm up jacket and your head cover could be done at home. No.
Mhm.
And then the third thing is, what do we do to help the religious sect that has to wear a full cover on the head?
Mhm.
Um, One of the things that we did was we found we were using disposable wrap, and they would put that on every day when they came in. I don't know if there's a company that makes something that's a little more appropriate that they could wear, but we do
Yeah.
have to accommodate their religious beliefs. So look around and make sure that that is also, because we cannot have them wearing what they had from, when they come from home and they go into the locker room, they have to take that off and put a clean one on, just like everybody else is wearing a clean head cover.
Yeah, yeah, and I really think, I mean, I'm not sure either if there's anything that's being sold now, but I would advise anybody to really research that, because one, you're gonna, you're helping your employee that needs to follow their religious beliefs, and then you're helping yourself by making sure your department is following policy and procedure.
Yeah, and one more thing about the jewelry, you actually could puncture your gloves,
Mhm.
and
Yes.
even a decontam glove. So you want to make sure that you have the correct gloves on. Now, we'll probably talk about this in another module, but I have to bring it up here because it talks about gloves. Um, AORN came out with, I think it was their packaging or processing instruments, one of their recommended, they call them guidelines now. And it was some new information. And they said that when the instruments come out of decontam, whether they're coming through the pass-through window or they're coming out of the washer, you should remove them with hands that you've just cleaned, not with the little, alcohol cleaner, actual hand hygiene, or don clean gloves. So you do not recontaminate the instruments that your friends in decontam just work so hard to clean. So that's another reason why you want to make sure you don't have jewelry on. Now it goes a step further. Every time you change what you're doing, so the phone rings, I have to leave to go answer the phone. Before I start working on that tray again, rewash my hands, put on clean gloves. So they're really, they have evidence of how we can recontaminate these instruments. And when you think about it, they're absolutely correct.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the biggest conversation right now is, do they wear gloves or, do they not wear gloves? I mean, I have people that want to wear gloves all day long. Then I have people that only want to wear gloves for things that are hand washed, which is appropriate. But even with this washer sterilizers, people still want to wear gloves.
Well, there's reasons why people wear gloves. The main reason is they've seen bioburden coming through.
Yes.
And they're trying to protect themselves.
Correct.
And that's sad. If that's your problem and that's the only reason why they're wearing gloves, get your act together and fix that problem, because that shouldn't be happening, period.
And that's 99% of the time.
They only should be wearing gloves because of this. And again, this is probably something that I'll recommend that they put it in the AAMI standard, but until it's published, you have to go by AORN and use that as your reference. And there's a science there to substantiate it. But sometimes it's an education issue too, because maybe there was one time and they did have a problem, and they have to understand that, wearing gloves unnecessarily can produce more problems, especially if they're gloves that, you can become sensitized to. But now with this new standard, again, washing your hands is just as effective, but it has to be, with the soap and water, or clean gloves when you're handling these. Now, there's another thing that we'll mention here, and when we eventually do one on processing equipment, your ultrasonic cleaner only cleans, it doesn't decontaminate. So at the end of the cycle, technically, those instruments are not considered safe to handle without gloves on. Now, they do now offer some ultrasonic cleaners that elevate the temperature at the end, so they are considered decontaminated. But most people, they just come on the market now. So if you do not have an automated washer, and this would mainly be your smaller surgery centers, although we have some that are doing spines that don't have washers, which is another issue. But if you only have an ultrasonic cleaner, when those instruments come in, you rinse off the enzyme, you process them in the ultrasonic cleaner, you rinse them again, and then when they come to pick them up, either through the pass-through window, they have to have clean gloves on, and keep those gloves on through the prep and packaging, because again, they have not been, the microbial level has not been reduced to a point where they consider safe to use with bare hands.
Yep. Yeah. So, but again, just person wanting to wear one all day long.
No, well, you can't wear them all, because I can't. Nobody stays in that department for 8 hours without changing what they're doing. They're answering the phone. They're going on break. They're going to lunch. The OR calls for something. You're leaving to get it off the shelf. Every time you change what you're doing, you have to put on. Now, these do not have to be decontam gloves. These could be, regular gloves, the exam gloves or procedure gloves. But this is something you want to consider doing.
And we definitely also, with talking about this, we have to add my two favorite things that are, this is more of a today's generation: cell phones and ear pods, the earbuds.
Well, the only stand that Amy took on this is that personal electronic equipment should be addressed in the facilities policy.
Mhm.
Now, there's a couple of safety issues here. When you have earbuds, you cannot hear overhead pages. You cannot hear emergencies. You may not even be able to hear the telephone.
Yep.
So that should, in my opinion, that should not be allowed. Number two, when you have music going, it can interfere with somebody else. Maybe you can work listening to music, but it bothers me. I lose my attention span. So
Uh-huh.
you have to know the culture in your department. You have to know what will work and what won't work. What
Yeah.
are the safety issues? What about personal cell phones? Are they allowed to get calls all day? The personal cell phones, are they being decontaminated when they're being brought in? A lot of facilities now have these automated disinfecting machines. They
Mhm.
became popular during COVID, and you just put them in. It takes like a minute, and it's considered decontaminated.
Mhm.
So you have to consider that as well. But you have to have a policy, and it has to be approved by your facility, because it'll vary from facility to facility.
Most facilities now, because the operating room definitely, cell phones are so used so much now in the operating room with sales
Yeah.
reps and stuff, that there are cell phone covers now that are approved, that they put it in their policy and peri-op services, and they have them available in the changing room now, where you put it in. I you know they're fine and they're great, but it still doesn't, to me, mean have your phone on your workstation the whole entire 8 hours and pick it up and answer phones and text messages when you need to it, because you need to be concentrating on your trays, because
But again, right there, just what you said, you're picking it up. Now you're going to change and wash your hands before you get to work again? No. And
yeah.
look at how much that's going to cost you in time. You add up all that time that's going to take to do it, and expense if they're going to be using gloves.
Mhm. Um,
So
One more thing about the with jewelry and nails, and I think this is so important, because I've been challenged this probably in the last 15 years so much. In the operating room, it has definitely, from when I started, it's gotten very relaxed. And I think that is more so because nursing has always had such a shortage since I pretty much got into the game. And nurses no longer scrub. Most of them most new ones have never scrubbed a case. They're not even taught how to scrub anymore.
right,
Very rarely. And so they're getting in a role where they're at a computer now, and they're just charting. It's they get up to open up supplies. They have definitely adapted the nails, the jewelry, and it really never gets pushed in peri-op services on that end. It will so on a surgical tech, because they have to wash and scrub and they're at the
right.
surgical field. So when you're dealing with sterile processing staff, and I would say it used to be where a lot of times they used to report to materials management, but I mean, it's so much peri-op services nowadays. The argument always is, well, the OR doesn't do this, the OR doesn't do that. Why the OR can have nails, the OR can, and it's simple as this: is that you're not in you have different cost centers, you're
Yeah.
different departments, you have different policies, and that leadership wants to allow that, then you should not try to convince or talk your sterile processing manager into forcing them to bend the rules for you. The rules are the rules, the policies are the policy. It's there for your safety, the patient's safety. I mean, you got to respect it.
Well, I heard it all the time. And again, it's education. You
Yeah.
know, it's what you're doing. And we are medical device reprocessors. We are producing sterile product. When you open something from a major company like Baxter or Bard or whoever, do you ever stop to say, gee, I wonder if this is sterile? Hell no.
No.
You have total confidence.
Yep.
Okay. Well, we need to exhibit that same total confidence to the operating room. And that's why we have different standards than they do.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't compare. It's like apples and oranges.
Correct.
It's really important that people understand that. And also, another thing that is coming to light now are body piercings.
Yes.
You know, if you have body piercings on the face, they should be covered with a Band-Aid or what have you while you're working, because again, a possible contamination.
Mm-hmm.
These are all things that you have to go through your dress code policy and address. And that's why infection prevention has to be included. Now, again, it's not in the AAMI standard now, but because it's in AORN and we have AORN representation, I know I plan to make recommendations for these, and whatever Amy says, we'll abide by.
Mm-hmm.
But in the meantime, there is the evidence there, so people should be following it.
You remember when when people had to wrap tattoos?
Oh, I didn't know.
Oh God, when I started, if you had like tattoos visible, you had like people would be wrapping them with like cling and stuff because the hospital policies would be no tattoos.
Wow.
You know,
Wow.
shown, you know what I mean? Like you can have them, but you couldn't show them. But now when you go into an operating room and you go walk into the scrub area where they're scrubbing hands, all the doctors have tattoos now.
I mean, and that's fine. I mean, that's personal preference. I don't
Yeah,
care one way or the other. But
me either.
you know, when it comes to dress code is, in summary, dress code is so critical to what we do, yet so little attention is paid to it. It's like, you know, well, yeah, put this on, put that on. Oh, we don't have the right gown. I'll just wear, you know, an isolation gown today. We have to understand that the rules are there to protect you. You just because, you know, we have antibiotics today, we don't know what's out there. Every day we're learning about new microorganisms that are resistant. I just read something last night about another variant in the COVID that is causing havoc all over. We
Yep.
don't know what's on the horizon. And so if we get into bad habits, something new comes along and we're not going to be prepared for it. I always said that our demise is more from microorganisms than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we have more to protect us from microorganisms than anything else. There's a lot of diseases we can't prevent.
Mm-hmm.
But when we take proper precautions, we can protect from the microorganisms. And you know, going to the doctor every time you go expecting to get an antibiotic. Well, that's how we wind up with resistance to micro antibiotics. So we have to follow the policies. We cannot take any chances that one time that you slip up could result in a very serious complication to you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not worth it.
Protection too, and I know we're running out of time, but there's one quick point to put up since you really hit me when you talked about that protection. Decontam, sales reps, environmental people, you should not allow them to come into decontam and start touching things without gloves and PPE. You've got to talk to them. You have to protect them. I can't tell you how many times I see that where people are coming to take the trash and they just want to wear, you know, gloves and no masks, no PPE, and they're walking by you, grabbing your trash. You've got to stop them. You've got to let them know. You know, you don't need to have confrontation with the person itself. You might want to have your leader speak to their leader about what our policy is for our area because they need to follow it when they're there. And I could tell you, I used to love playing this game with sales reps. I used to love going into a decontam and finding my sales rep looking for an instrument with no PPE, no glove. And I used to go in there and I it's probably mean of me to do it, but I would go, oh man, we just had 2 cases of hepatitis and everything was all over the place. Nobody cleaned up yet. And you see the fear in their eye and start freaking out and like running to the sink. And I would go, I was just joking, but it can happen. Protect yourself.
There's another point to that, Jason, because I've seen that too. If that sales rep had an exposure, your hospital is responsible. However, they could deny the claim because he wasn't informed that he could not be back there, and it wasn't enforced. In other words, it should be posted on the door, and everyone in Decontam has a responsibility to enforce it. If the rep doesn't listen, they just very nicely say, I'm sorry you can't come in here without a gown and gloves. Oh, I don't need a, no. If you're not going to listen, then you call the manager. Joint Commission has given immediate patient jeopardy to facilities where they have found sales reps in Decontam looking over instruments that they're dropping off. And we don't know where they came from. Okay. So you're absolutely correct. It's got to be enforced. I've had engineering people who came that didn't want, I would tell them to leave. Well, you're not going to get it done. That's fine. Then I report them to their manager. You know, so if, again, I say it again, when you have a policy, it has to be enforced or you're negligent.
Yeah. Well, Nancy, thank you. We are definitely out of time on this one.
We could go for another hour on this.
Oh my God. I know there's so many stories and so many more things that we could discuss. Thank you again. I want to thank the listeners. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe and leave any comments about future products. If you're watching them from our website, thank you very much. And hopefully you're getting your CEU for that.
And we hope you enjoy this. We have a lot more interesting topics coming up, and we look forward to having you listen to them.
Yep. Thank you very much. To receive your free CEU approved by the CBSSPD and HSPA, go to www.spdceus.com. Watch the entire podcast on the Sterile Processing University page, and then after that, you will receive a free 1-hour CEU. Thank you.
There's a girl